Let's end this.
Yes! Yes!
This war we're deep within. I can't go through it alone, and I won't leave you on your own. I stand before you now and promise you I am not afraid. I will fight and guide the way. We will rise again to glory then, soar into the sky. If you stop and see, then you just might believe.
What's up guys, the name's Rena Dragon and welcome back to Seduce Me to the Demon War. So last we left off, our ritual was successful. Damien's a human, and yes, we have brought back together Seto and Diana. Yes, I am happy now. Okay, so we're about to go into battle with the Demon Lords, so let's get right to that. The day of the siege had finally dawned. We had arrived at the Demon Lord's castle, and we were as ready as we could be. Many armies bearing different banners and colors washed over the grounds before the castle, ready to rush in and lay waste to the Demon Lord and the remainder of his forces. All of us shared a common enemy, and upon his demise, would all finally know some form of peace. Even during the roll call of the major generals, the air became full of determination and pride.
Mirth, Avarice, Nadia, Fiorna, Aradum.
Each name called became a mark on history. This was the war to bring freedom or destruction to the demon world. If the rebellion didn't win this fight, then this war would never end. If the rebellion won, then the world would become united in a hopefully peaceful rule. The hour before the battle was set to take place, my thoughts instantly ran back to our final meeting in Lilith Castle. Diana had pulled the leaders and us together, instructing us on how exactly to proceed.
Seto, you will be joining Shadow and Sergeant in the front, taking care of the main army head-on. I expect that you will come out of it alive.
Yes! I don't want my OTP to die.
Yes, my lady.
Rabbit, Faye, you are in charge of range attacks and defense. We cannot allow any of those blasted imps getting to us from behind.
Yes, ma'am!
As Diana looked to me, I grew slightly fearful. I had to get into the Demon Lord's castle, but how exactly did Diana plan on getting me there?
You and your fiancé will take the side route straight to the castle.
Wait, huh?
We've organized our army to have our strongest on the front lines and against the tree line, giving us a side route for you to make your way straight to the castle.
If anything trickles into the side route, you'll be able to handle it. However, there is something I must ask of you.
What is it?
If you are indeed attacked, you need to defend your fiancé the entire way there. Do not let him use his energy.
What? Are you insane?
When you get to the castle, I will be fighting one-on-one with the Demon Lord. If something should happen to me, then I need you to take over. She is not ready to fight him, and you need to be at full strength to finish him off.
She's been taught well. Let her prove herself when the time comes.
Thank you, Seto! I stared, listening and reaffirming the order. I couldn't lie. I was nervous. However, I was determined enough to see this through. I looked over at my fiancé with a confident smile. I got this. Don't worry. Despite the worried look in his eyes, he nodded and held my hand. trusting me and my decision to agree with Diana's command. Diana rolled her shoulders and looked at the map draped over the war table between us all. Her gaze pierced into the parchment as the aura around her body pulsated in anger.
I will fly ahead and meet the Demon Lord head on. No matter what happens, I will not allow that monster to live.
The pure determination and anger in her voice practically sent a shiver down my spine. She was set on seeing this through to the end, and I was sure that she was willing to even die if it meant taking the Demon Lord with her. The remaining incubi and their wives were asked to stay behind the army and guard the main base, where Rabbit and Faye were stationed. They needed as many eyes as possible in the back of the battle, so the 4 couples were perfect to keep things in check. As they agreed, the meeting ended and the mental preparation had begun. The idea of the upcoming battle scared me, sending waves of fear and worry up and down my body in response to the thought.
So, this is our last day in the demon world.
Yeah, it is. Damien and I stared at the map outline of the dark castle that was once his unwanted home. Damien's hand slowly eased into mine as he spoke again.
I will protect you no matter what. I promise.
I listened to him speak before nodding, taking in a deep breath. Everything would be okay. We would be fine. I had to believe in myself and get us to the castle when the time was right. Like a beacon, our forces became the banner of hope and strength for the rebellion. At the sight of Diana, many soldiers bowed or stared in awe at inspiration. Maybe it was her presence, or maybe it was for what she stood for, but as Diana stood at the cliffside of the mountain, the air became full of energy and power. My fiancé, Rabbit, Faye, and I stood behind her as Diana stood on the ledge of the cliffside, addressing the rebellion for their final battle. Her voice echoed across the field, booming and reverberating through the air like thunder.
Milites! Et hug liberati isturei tramcun tuis omnibus conversiris, sto vobiscum reducitic vos ad spem, nocte, lavabir mur, arcem, hostium sanguine!
What is she saying?
She said that the castle will be bathed in blood, and she will lead everyone to freedom.
That first part's a bit much.
It's just to spur the troops for war. I'm sure she didn't mean it literally.
I nodded as I stared at the back of Diana's head. A part of me felt a little intimidated and jealous of the power she had. She really could make armies bow to her and obey her every whim. At the same time, I knew that she was doing the right thing for this world.
Ele Dio dominati sunt nostri, nos destruet, eo mitere, profundissimum, inferni detractos.
Rabbit and Faye stepped forward and held their hands out towards the castle, focusing their energies and forcing the stone walls around it to crumble and dissolve down into the earth. Diana summoned her saber and letting it shine brilliantly as the purple taint over her skin began to twist and turn. Before my eyes, the taint on her back took shape, lifting off of Diana's skin and morphed into a set of demonic wings. I could only stare, jaw dropped, as Diana's body lifted off of the ground and began to fly over the legions, slowly gliding towards the castle. Why can't I read?
To war! To battle!
At her final command, Diana's wings pulsated in the air, flopping gracefully as she swooped down and forward. She was charging and flying for the castle walls, saber bared and ready to spill blood. As the armies below began to bellow and march forward, Rabbit took hold of my shoulder and turned me away from the castle to face her.
Come, we must hurry.
Understanding the need for urgency, I nodded and rushed forward with the rest of the incubi towards the slope down the mountainside.
Everything is in order. Sergeant Diana's guard are at the front lines, while Shadow is with his legion to the west.
What about our route to the castle?
We've done what we can to keep your way clear. We'll try to make sure the battle won't break through the path.
I nodded, feeling the need to rush, nip at my heels, pushing me forward. My fiancé seemed to agree, gripping my hand and walking at my pace alongside me. However, as we finally arrived at the forest line, Faye and Rabbit stopped, looking back at us.
Straight through here. The sound of the war will always be on your right, so do not get lost.
You'll be fine though, just follow the tree line.
In sync, my fiancé and I nodded in acknowledgement before turning to see the other brothers and their wives. So, this is it.
Remember your surroundings and protect each other.
Gotcha.
Be careful, alright? Make sure you stay safe.
Will do.
Princess, brother, we'll see you in the end.
Gotcha, Eric.
We have faith in you. You'll make it there, and we'll return to the human world soon.
Yes, Irene.
Kick his dead body a couple times for me, alright? Right in the head.
Gotcha, Sam. I will do that.
We'll be right here rooting for you and watching your back, okay?
Thanks, Carrie.
We'll finish this and rush in as soon as we can, alright?
Alright, you cinnamon bun, Matthew.
Make sure you kick some serious ass. Show that old goat what he gets for messing with you.
Gotcha, Norin. I smiled, despite the nerves running through my body. I held onto my fiancé's hand and gave it a hard squeeze before receiving one back in kind. We'll finish this, then we'll go home. The group nodded before I slowly turned and looked into the tree line, took a breath, and rushed forward. Matching my speed, my love followed, weaving through the trees behind me to not lose sight of me. The journey was surprisingly fast going through the trees. The sound of the war crashed beside us outside of the tree line, causing me to cover my ears a bit from the volume. But I shook my head and pressed forward, not wanting to become distracted. The goal was to get to the castle. I had to focus. Before I could, however, I skidded to a stop, seeing imps appear from the distance and rush towards us. As my incubus came up and behind me and spotted the imps, he prepared himself to attack, but I placed my hand on his arms, stopping him. I got this. Back up, I got this, Damien. I walked forward and forwarded my weapon, letting it shine brightly in the darkness of the forest around us and temporarily blinding the imps ahead of us. The hilt of my sword materialized in my hand as a sharp lavender blade jutted out from the handle, glimmering brightly with my energy. I swung it around a bit, remembering the training I went through with it, and steadied myself. The imps, who were blinded by my light only for a moment, looked back at me and stared as they took note of the weapon I had possessed. With a battle cry, I rushed forward, taking advantage of their blank state. Grah! That would be my roar, my fighting roar. So manly, right? Okay, I sprinted forward and carved my sword through an imp, cutting his neck open in my slice, before twirling around and ripping through the imp beside him and effectively cutting him down. The imps fell as the others became shell-shocked at the sight. It must have been a big surprise to see a human cut down two of their number, but I wasn't in the mood to let them recover. My body quickly turned in front of another imp as I swung my weapon once again, slicing open his throat. With a bubble cry, he fell as well as I rushed forward again towards the castle, uncaring. The remaining imps began to quake and step back in fear, most likely never expecting to see a human decimate their companions. I wasn't so friendly and merciful, especially in this war, as I lunged forward again and skewered through another imp, hearing the steel of my weapon breaking through his body. My incubus, despite probably being surprised at my carnage, followed as I continued forward, fighting through every imp that came our way. I had lost count of how many crossed me, but I didn't care. All I cared was about getting to the castle. By the time we reached the end of the forest, there were a slew of dead bodies behind me. I stood at the tree line, panting and feeling the waves of adrenaline and lack of energy run through my veins. I panted for air, slowly focusing on calming down, as my energy quickly depleted from its adrenaline-filled high. The weapon in my hand quickly vanished, no longer able to maintain its form without my energy. That was all I could do before my energy was expended and a wave of exhaustion rolled through my body. I began to fall forward, exhausted. My fiancé, however, quickly rushed forward and caught me in his arms.
Whoa! I got you. Are you okay?
Huh? I looked up to see Damien staring down at me with worry and panic in his expression. We were safe for the moment, so I merely smiled up at him with a nod. I'm fine. I promise to protect you, like you protect me. Damien softly smiled and hugged me to him, pressing his head into my shoulder.
I love you so much.
I hugged him back, feeling relieved that we had finally arrived at the castle and were about to rush inside. As we slowly pulled away, Damien lifted me up and helped me to my feet.
Will you be okay?
I nodded, shaking off the exhaustion from my mind. I was ready to end this. I looked up at the castle gates and felt a rush of determination run through me. The thought about defeating the Demon Lord to get you home fills you with determination. Let's go finish this. With that, Damien and I rushed forward into the castle. The final battle had begun. The castle halls were grim and dark, sending shivers through me as Damien and I ran through them towards the sounds of battle. All across the ground were bodies of slaughtered imps and soldiers, most likely dead by Diana's hand. As we finally arrived in the throne room, Damien held out his arm to stop me and protect me from the battle waging within. Diana and the Demon Lord were in some sort of an energy deadlock, with a bolt of red energy streaming out of the Demon Lord's hand and colliding with a purple flame that came from Diana's. The two energies pressed against one another, unrelenting in their violent crash as each stream of energy tried to obtain dominance over the other. The Demon Lord and Diana were equally matched.
Give up, succubus! This world will bow to me!
Over my dead body!
That can be arranged!
A burst of red energy pulsed around the Demon Lord's body, intensifying his bolt of lightning in the deadlock and forcing Diana to step back from the sheer force of it. Despite this, Diana pressed back, regaining her momentum and her ground. Damien and I remained still and quiet, watching the bout. Damien was meant to be backup in case something happened to Diana, and, thankfully, she didn't necessarily need help for now, or at least it didn't look like it. Maybe Damien wouldn't have to step in after all. Diana shut her eyes and seemed to focus her energy, large black and purple flames slowly crawling around her body in a threatening aura as the power behind her energy stream increased and began to push back hard against the Demon Lord. As Diana opened her eyes, I gasped as they revealed themselves to be completely covered in gold. For a moment, the Demon Lord seemed to struggle maintaining his place, stepping back to try and remain upright at the hard push Diana was throwing his way. However, as he turned his body, the Demon Lord spotted me and Damien at the entrance of the hall, and a smirk grew on his face.
Ah, uninvited guests!
Diana suddenly turned her head our way, surprised at the acknowledgement, which caused her momentum to falter a bit. Diana, focus! Focus! Taking the chance, the Demon Lord released another pulse of energy at Diana, forcing her to bend back a bit and stumble on her feet. No, Diana! Diana's eyes returned to normal as she raised her other hand to assist the stream of energy from her end of the deadlock, attempting to push forward again and regain her place. The Demon Lord, however, laughed.
It's useless!
No! With a final push, the Demon Lord let out an angry snarl and forced his energy forward, causing Diana to slam back against the far pillar and losing his concentration in her attack. Smirking evilly, the Demon Lord took the chance and shot a bolt of red lightning at Diana, electrocuting her.
Ah!
Diana! Damien growled and stepped forward, but through her torture, Diana turned her head and glared at Damien, making him freeze in place.
Not your turn!
Despite being covered in red-tinted bolts of lightning, Diana began to focus her energy again and formed a deep purple aura around herself, letting the Demon Lord's attack bounce around her new barrier. With the breath, Diana let her energy pulse out, dissolving the Demon Lord's attack, and shot a burst of purple flames in retaliation. Her flames slammed themselves into the Demon Lord's chest, punching him back towards the pillar opposite of hers. I could see the light in Diana's eyes flicker from blood red to gold as she locked eyes with the Demon Lord. Something began to burn beneath her murderous gaze, as if her simple stare was powerful enough to burn through the most courageous of hearts. However, the smirk plastered on the Demon Lord's face made my body shiver at the sight. He was nowhere near phased from Diana's glare. In fact, he seemed to find it amusing from the look in his eyes.
So, The rebel queen is protecting the mistake. How pathetic.
Can't... Let me not say anything.
The only mistake that lives in this world is you.
Ha! The echo of the Demon Lord's laughter bounced through the hall with an unforgiving reverb, invading my ears and pounding against my mind. I could feel his dark energy pass through his voice and shake my soul. This wasn't a nightmare or a vision. The Demon Lord was right in front of me, and his presence was terrifying. Diana and the Demon Lord began to circle one another, with Diana moving to stand in front of us while the Demon Lord positioned himself in front of his throne at the foot of the dais. However, I could feel the anxiousness in Damien's arm as I held it to me, keeping him in place. He wanted to fight the Demon Lord, but Diana wasn't letting him, and it was bothering him to no end.
Let me help.
I don't need help.
With that answer, Diana sprinted forward, summoning her wings and shooting herself like a bullet towards the Demon Lord. As she passed the midpoint of the room, Diana formed her saber in his hand. What? Diana formed her saber in his hands. His hands! Okay. And swung it at the Demon Lord. Oh, that sign at the top, please pay no attention to that. My friend probably signed in on her end of the computer. To her disgust, the Demon Lord parried with ease with his own sword, knocking her saber back and swinging to get a slice of her. The battle became a quick slam of dodges and parries from the Demon Lord and Diana's, the sound of steel clanging violently in the air. It became a challenge, still keeping Damien near me. I could feel the anger and need for battle in his tense muscles, ushering me to squeeze it and pull him towards me cautiously. He obeyed, but who knew how long he would? What caused me to look away from Damien was the sound of Diana crying out in pain. I watched as Diana's body flew across the room and slammed itself into the nearby wall, part of the balcony above it collapsing and crumbling on top of her. I could almost hear bones breaking from the rocks that had fallen on her. Diana, no! I could see Diana digging her way through the rubble, her hand crawling out of an opening in desperation to pull herself out. However, Damien took that chance to march towards the Demon Lord, ready to take up the fight. Seeing his new opponent, the Demon Lord chuckled darkly and brandished his sword, pointing it at Damien in a taunt.
So, you've come to try and stop me? You're as foolish as I remember.
You know nothing about me.
I may not, but I remember all about your mother.
Oh my god, no! Do not! That sparked the flare in Damien's rage. Damien swiped his hand from his pocket and pulled out the gem Diana had given him. From the grip he had on it, I was surprised it didn't smash between his fingers. I would be too. However, before Damien could step forward, a flash of purple zipped across the room and slammed into the Demon Lord's body, shoving him into a pillar, and successfully destroying it with his body.
I'm not done with you yet!
The room began to slowly shape in the reflection of my nightmare, with rubble and stone littering the ground. Diana floated in the air on her wings, but I could tell that her leg, at least a rib, was broken, making her curl over herself from the pain. Diana kept glaring at the Demon Lord, however, gritting her teeth through the pain and forcing her saber once again in her hand. As only a couple fingers and her thumb managed to wrap around the handle, I could tell then that her hand was also injured.
You'll have to kill me first before I let you get away.
To see Diana continue to fight was remarkable, but I knew very well that she wasn't going to last long. One more avalanche of rubble on her would end her. The Demon Lord rose from the pile of stone that had fallen on him, grinning despite the blood rushing down his forehead.
Then let me finish the job!
With a cackle, the Demon Lord let his red energy pulse around him, making the rubble around him practically disintegrate before he lunged forward to slam his sword into hers, shooting them both towards the opposite end of the throne room. Diana and the Demon Lord returned to their clashing of steel, as Damien only fumed at the bout. My instincts screamed at me to pull him back and calm him down, but was I in a place to stop him? I want to let Damien attack, but I don't want Diana to get killed. Being honest here, I don't want Diana to get killed before Sarah becomes really disappointed, so we're gonna calm Damien down. I had to force Damien to accept Diana handling the fight. If he interfered, then Diana might attack him as well, just from her adrenaline rush. Oh yeah, forgot about that. Ooh, I grabbed Damien's hand and pulled him back to me, needing to set him straight. As he looked to me, I could see the need for revenge burning in his eyes. I instinctively felt bad, but I knew better than to let him rampage. Come on. I insisted and pulled Damien back towards the entrance of the hall, giving Diana and the Demon Lord space to fight. Damien reluctantly followed, not allowing the anger in his eyes to die as he stared at and pinned his gaze on the fight. The battle intensified as we settled back in our place. Diana seemed to match equally to her opponent as the fight... What is wrong with me? I can't read. As the fight waged violently between them, red lightning and purple flames sparked between their weapons, lighting the room like fireworks. As Diana's saber flew out of her hands and clattered on the floor, she brought her arms up and, to my surprise, began to use her forearms to defend herself from the Demon Lord's blade. How was it possible? I would never know, but his blade would merely clang against the purple taint on Diana's skin. Like she was wearing some form of armor, or perhaps her demon markings protected her. Regardless, Diana defended herself as much as she could until she was met with a kick to the chest, sending her flying back into another pillar and breaking it apart with her body. Her body was completely covered by rubble, unmoving and unwavering from the hit. Diana! The Demon Lord finally looked to Damien, tongue darted out to lick his blade as his smirk grew.
Your turn. Mistake.
Damien snarled as he finally settled himself, ready to take on his father, not only for the world and for his mother, but for Diana as well. Damien's body pulsed and caused him to kneel over slightly from the burst of power in his chest. With a hiss, Diana growled as his body began to shift. His clothes slowly vanished and black markings began to crawl across Damien's skin. As Damien's horns reformed on his head, the air began to shift to one of extreme cold. Something about Damien began to pulse with a dark energy, one I had not seen from him even before he lost his powers. As Damien finally locked eyes with the Demon Lord, a flash of black washed over his gaze, sending a vibration of fear down my back.
Let's end this.
Yes! Yes! In a show of power, the Demon Lord let out a snarl and charged forward with his sword. Damien, however, summoned a large invisible burst of energy, pushing the Demon Lord back. The Demon Lord fell back and tumbled back onto his feet after skidding across the marble with a snarl. I had to cover my face with my hands to block the gusts of wind that followed, almost feeling myself slide across the floor on my heels from the wave. Damien was billowing with energy and it definitely showed. With a look of cold thirst for murder in his eyes, Damien lifted his head and raised his arms to his side. In a similar fashion to the succubus before him, the black markings on Damien's back began to twist and turn, slowly pulling themselves off of his skin and forming a set of wings. Staring at them, they were surprisingly much larger than Diana's. They shuddered and flapped themselves through the air, pushing gusts of wind forward in a taunting gesture at the Demon Lord. As the Demon Lord began to stand, Damien brought his hands in front of him and formed a large rod of black mist in his hands. It quickly solidified in his grip, and it began to gleam brightly as the one end began to protrude and curve into the end of a scythe. I knew that the gem would intensify Damien's power, but just how much did it strengthen? The Demon Lord measured Damien with his eyes, glaring hard and gripping his sword in both anger and dash of surprise.
How did you get this much power?
I don't answer to scum like you.
Oh shit! With that reply, Damien swooped forward and swung his scythe back to reap through the Demon Lord like a grim reaper. Despite the Demon Lord being able to parry the attack with his blade, the Demon Lord found himself skidding across the floor from the force of Damien's attack. Damien became relentless and continued to swing and slam his scythe blade into the Demon Lord's sword. The heavy slamming of steel beating on steel boomed through the room as Damien began to push the Demon Lord back towards his throne. Finally, the Demon Lord was knocked back onto his throne, stunned momentarily as Damien pulled his scythe back, ready to decapitate his enemy once and for all. Unfortunately, the blade met with the Demon Lord's sword at the last minute, making me grimace in aggravation. I wanted this to end. I wanted the Demon Lord to fall already. This dance of death had gone on for long enough, and there was no reason for this battle to prolong itself any further. The Demon Lord was clinging to his last moments, and every part of me wished he would give up. Damien was more powerful than him. This fight would eventually be over. Damien pressed his body into his sight, pushing against the Demon Lord.
Give up.
Trying to scare me, boy? Let me show you how it's done!
Distracted by the deadlock, Damien was suddenly kicked back through the air, sent tumbling in surprise as the Demon Lord rose back onto his feet and locked eyes with me. A wave of fear shot through me and I was locked frozen in place. I attempted to break free, mentally commanding every part of my body to move or to do something to stop him, but no muscle in my body obeyed. Damien quickly tumbled back onto his feet, burning his gaze into the Demon Lord before looking back to me and seeing what he was doing to me.
Be glad, boy! I'm setting her free from the demon world!
With a sadistic howl, a red bolt of lightning rammed itself into the ceiling, causing a large rock above me to shatter off of the structure and plummet towards me.
Look out!
But the boulder quickly impacted my back. It wasn't heavy enough to completely crush me against the marble, but I could tell that I had broken a rib. I had a broken ribber too. However, I felt a body press against me, bearing the boulder from completely smashing me beneath it. I could look up to see a familiar face, wincing at the pain now embedded in her shoulder and arms. Diana? Despite being battered and bloodied, Diana gripped the boulder, pressing most of its weight off of me and taking it on herself, making sure my injuries were limited just broken bones. Diana growled and pushed the boulder off of us at last, releasing a pained huff of air as she looked to me in concern.
Are you alright?
I could only nod, astonished at the turn of events. Diana was alive. How was that possible? Staring at her, I could tell she was near death's door, but she wasn't going to go down without the Demon Lord going down first. Her wings were pressed hard against her back, seemingly broken, but as she lifted me back up, a hum of purple energy rushed through Diana's body and forced her wings to flex out, snapping them into place once more.
This battle isn't over. Not by a long shot.
The pair of us looked over at the Demon Lord, seeing him emotionally seethe at the sight of us.
You just don't know when to die, do you?
Diana smirked and stepped forward, holding her hand back towards me and forming a large purple barrier around me.
We've got unfinished business to take care of first. Right, Damien?
With an angered nod, Damien stood, gripping his scythe while Diana formed her saber in her hand, materializing a wrap around her hand and the handle to keep it in her grip. Yes, two of them against the Demon Lord.
It's over, you bastard.
Yes. Baring his teeth, the Demon Lord gripped his sword and stepped down from the dais to meet Damien and Diana halfway.
I will slaughter you both!
A violent shudder ran up my spine at his words before Damien and Diana vaulted forward, slamming their weapons into the Demon Lord's parrying sword at the collision. Wow. That was the next sentence. Wow. At the collision, a bright flash of red, purple, and black energy sparked and lit the room, like a large firework. I moved to the edge of the barrier, trying to watch from the safety of the spell around me. As Damien and Diana slowly began to beat down the Demon Lord's defenses, the spark between their clashing, blinding the Demon Lord. No amount of bravado could save the Demon Lord now. The room slowly began to crumble just from the heavy sound waves of their fighting, causing rock upon rubble to fall onto the marble, almost like hail. This time, Damien was nowhere near defenseless. Damien would escape with me, and the Demon Lord would die here alone. I felt confidence run through me at the idea. Damien could do this. Tired of the still battle, Diana swooped around the Demon Lord and slashed at the back of his knees, forcing him to fall forward and drop his sword from the impact.
Enough! End this!
Without a breath of mercy, Damien raised his scythe back, taking aim at his target.
Goodbye, Father.
A flash of black energy swept the room as Damien swung his scythe down through the neck of the Demon Lord. For a moment, nothing seemed to have occurred. It wasn't until a large open line appeared on the Demon Lord's neck, and his eyes began to glaze over that I realized what had happened. In an angled cut, not perfect by any means, the Demon Lord's head slid off of his shoulders and tumbled to the marble floor, rolling until it stopped on the edge of one of his horns. From his newly opened neck, black and red blood began to gush out and drain at the body as the body fell forward. The sound of his body hitting the ground echoed the chamber, solidifying the death of his father. The battle had been won at last. I could finally breathe. Whew. The realization of the entire event coursed through me like a wave as a weight lifted itself from my heart. The curse, I knew then, had been lifted at last. I was free to go home. I began drowning in feelings of joy and relief, happy that it was all over and overwhelmed by everything that had happened. As the sight beside me faded alongside the barrier around me, Damien slowly turned to face me, hearing my slowly growing cries of joy. It was almost overwhelming. We won. We really won. Damien slowly started to walk towards me. His form fading from the demon he got the chance to be human he actually was. His clothes slowly materialized around his body, but the bruises and suit of the battle remained as a reminder of what had happened. Just looking into his eyes, I could see the satisfaction of his deeds blossom in his gaze. He stared at me, happy to see me, and I felt myself grin from ear to ear at him. I wasn't being pulled away from him, nor was he dead. Damien and I were together, and we were okay. Damien finally stopped in front of me and wrapped his arms around me, letting everything sink in within my embrace, and as I buried my face in his shoulder. I was tired of seeing the death around me now, and my voice is getting tired as well. So much reading. All I wanted was to go home. You did it, Damien.
Yeah. We can go home now.
I looked up at him, feeling the ache of the lost adrenaline in my system course through me as I clung to him. The war was over for us. At last. Diana, however, collapsed onto the ground on the dais of the throne, panting for air as she stared at the pair of us in exhaustion. Before she could finish her sentence, Diana's eyes rolled into the back of her head and she completely passed out onto the ground. In a panicked rush, I thrust my hand out towards her. Settle! In a flash of light, Seto's form materialized and looked around, surprised at the summoning. As his eyes landed on the passed-out Diana, he slammed down onto his knees and cradled her in his arms. Relieved to see her breathing, he hugged her to his chest, giving her his energy. I clung to Damien, now mentally wiped out. Who knew the end of a battle was so exhausting? I had fought with Lisette once before, but it was nowhere near as intense as this fight was. Not by a long shot. Why would you compare the fight with Lisette to this? This is much more dramatic and hard than Lisette. God damn. Damien and I looked at each other, both of us feeling the lack of energy from the battle attempt to consume our bodies, before leaning into one another for a well-deserved rest. One thing was for certain, this chapter of my story had come to an end. It was over. The war was finally over. As the smoke cleared, we were victorious. The soldiers left standing were at once to cheer in victory. The sky became littered with the howls and cries of joyful and happy. The tyranny of the demon lord had ended. But what now? Home was now possible. We could go back to the human world and we could live our lives as we wanted. It was something I desperately wanted, and yet my body was not ready to make the journey just yet. We had to celebrate the success of the war, after all. As the full moon rose over Lilith Castle towards the dawn, the entirety of the demon world celebrated with endless drinking, food, laughter, and dancing. It was so unreal, but the courtyard that I could see was filled with smiles and happy faces. We had stayed for one more night, traveling back to Lilith Castle to rest and return home as healthy as we could be. After all, we had just gone through a war. One more night in the demon world wasn't going to hurt us. While the majority of the rebellion danced in the courtyard, I remained with the incubi and the rebel leaders, who were all in the royal hall, having their own celebration. Drinks were shared and battle stories were exchanged, making some laugh and others roll their eyes. I found myself intrigued at the stories Sergeant told about the front line. As I looked to Diana, however, she simply kept quiet with a small smile on her face. She looked at the incubi and the rebel leaders in silence before walking away from the little party we had. As if she knew I was staring at her, Diana looked over at me and slightly gestured with her head to follow her. Let's follow her. I followed, curious as to where she was going. I made sure to remain quiet as I separated from the rest of the group. and followed her out of the room into the hall. The entire journey, Diana didn't speak a word. Even Zero didn't follow her, most likely being told that she wanted to speak with me alone. Diana led me through the castle, up a couple sets of stairs, into what looked to be a royal bedroom with a balcony. Was this a guest room? It was untouched, and I could smell the very faint scent of dust. Why did she bring me here? Diana stepped up into the room, using her magic to ignite the candelabras and the air out the room by opening the balcony window. Before I could ask, however, Diana finally spoke up.
I have to thank you, dear.
For what?
For aiding us in this war. We've been fighting the Demon Lord for so long. We thought the war would never end. As terrible as the circumstance was, if you hadn't been summoned here, we probably would have still been fighting now.
Diana walked to the balcony and leaned against the railing, staring into the dark night sky. The light from the room illuminated her form as she gazed at the stars. Despite the situation around us, the air seemed calm, with the faint echo of the celebrations whispering through the night. I walked over and stood behind her, leaning against the balcony, and looked at Diana as she smiled and let out a chuckle.
To be very honest, I didn't expect to ever see you again. After I took your energy that night, I vowed to never deal with humans again. No clairvoyance could have told me about you coming into play in this war.
I wasn't exactly counting on coming here. But at least I got to bring peace here, but it was good to see you again. I'll probably say that choice for another time, but at least I got to help bring peace here. Diana smiled, nodding to me. I was really glad to help bring peace to a world. It wasn't out of pride or vanity. It was a matter of helping people clearly in need.
We owe you much thanks.
I accept your thanks when I finally get married.
Oh, I had almost forgotten.
I tilted my head at her. What was she talking about? Diana lifted one of her hands towards the sky and waved her hand through the air, making a soft purple mist glow around her fingers. Within seconds, the mist morphed and formed itself into a lavender-covered lily, resting peacefully between Diana's fingers. She brought it down and presented it to me with a kind gaze.
A gift, my dear.
A gift? I slowly took the flower out of Diana's hands and inspected it visually. It was light, but I could feel a soft glow of magic emanating from the stem and petals. The bloom reminded me of a human world lily, but something about it seemed different, otherworldly. Where did different come into play? Man, I'm losing my voice.
A flower known only to demons of Lilith. We call it the Flower of Lilith, because these flowers were said to have been created when Lilith first appeared in the abyssal plains.
I stared at Diana, not understanding why she was giving me such a gift. She chuckled at my confusion and leaned against the railing, continuing her explanation.
It is also a flower we succubi use when we marry.
Are you giving me your blessing? Are you serious? That's so sweet. Use? What do you mean? Diana chuckled again before she gently took the flower from my hands and tucked it behind my ear. As it settled against my ear, I felt mist circle my head and form into a flower crown of lavender lilies. The way Diana looked at me made me feel like I was in my bridal wear already.
A human you may be, but Lilith would have been proud to see you marrying one of her own. These flowers represent her blessing, and may only crown the worthy.
So Lilith is blessing me and you're blessing me too. That's so sweet. I felt a blush run across my cheeks. This was a blessing? I slowly reached up and ran my fingers along the flower crown adorning my head, feeling the soft petals against my fingertips. They were almost pulsing with energy. I felt both flattered and honored that a simple flower felt that I was worthy enough to be crowned my head. Diana let out a sigh and looked back to the sky, making me do the same. One would have expected the sky to be full of smoke or smell of a war's aftermath, but the sky was clear and fresh air drifted through my nose as I inhaled. It was indeed another world, and tonight was my last night in it.
Well, you did it! Congratulations! You've made it to the end of your story. I have to say, I am very surprised at how it turned out.
Woo! We finished making all choices, but we still have some left, though. Still have a little bit of ending left. Let's keep going.
Nevertheless, I'm glad things worked out in the end, whether it was for the better or otherwise. Despite everything Damien went through, it was all worth it to obtain his humanity and to be truly happy, don't you think? He got his revenge for his mother, and both of you saved the demon world. I definitely would put that down as successes.
Hell yeah.
Anyways, you've been through a lot, so why don't we skip to... Huh? You want to know what happened after the war?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I guess I could tell you. After the war was finished, the entire rebellion celebrated. Word spread far and wide about the rebellion's success, and soon every kingdom in the abyssal plains had become united with the new authority. You would think demons would be more hostile towards each other, being demons and all, but the threat of the Demon Lord was what brought the entire world together. The entire world united under one banner, the Lilith Crest. Diana became the sovereign of the entire plane, accepted and loved by practically everyone because of her devotion to the world and her bravery in the war. And, thanks to you, she was finally able to find true love in the form of a tainted Nephilim named Sero.
Hey, yeah! We helped them to get together. I'm so happy.
Oh, crap! I shouldn't have let that one slip. Oops.
No, oops, I want to know.
Anyway, when they bound their souls together in marriage, he became king of the demon world. However, it was just a title to him. The real power belonged to Diana.
Oh my god, they got married. I'm happy right now. So happy.
Diana became one of the most beloved rulers in all of demon world history. Her natural heart of gold led her to lead the world to a prosperous future, one filled with peace and happiness. The other rebel leaders supported her, eventually changing the caste system of the world and slowly working their way towards a plane as equal and peaceful as it could be. Diana had her suspicions, of course, as any monarch would, but if they had any sort of bad thoughts about her before, they certainly didn't during the recreation of the world. And I believe that is everything that happened after, well, except for your story anyway. Damien and you, both completely human now, return home and set up once more for your wedding. Take 2. Huh? How do I know? Well, I have my ways. Maybe you should check it out.
Awesome, so we got married. Alright, let's see what's left. It took a while to get everything back in order, but with the help of Damien's brothers and their wives, we were able to finally have the wedding Damien and I dreamed of. Everything was organized to the T, and it was perfect indeed. It was indeed perfect. The revels of the ceremony and reception still shook through me even through the honeymoon. It was so unreal. I was married to the love of my life, and we were about to live our lives together forever. I could go on and on about the wedding and the honeymoon, but honestly, after the war, I was more concerned of living my life afterwards. Our lives escalated to new heights after we officially became husband and wife. Damien finally settled on what he wanted to do, dedicating himself to writing small stories for children. Aww, that's so cute! Reading to him became a passion, drawing him towards teaching children to learn before they had gotten older. It was beautiful, to say the least. As for me, I began to go through my own success in life, dedicating myself to becoming exactly what I wanted to be. After all, Damien was dedicated to his work and goal. If I put the same amount of work as I did in the demon world, then I was going to be okay. However, there was never a day that went by that I didn't think about what was happening in the abyssal plains. It was a heavy chapter of my life, one that tested the love between me and Diana. While the struggle was rough, Damien was finally able to realize his dream of becoming a human. Even more so, he was able to take down his father and gain revenge not only for his mother, but for what the Demon Lord had done to him as a child. I was so proud of him, and I was even more proud to call him mine. This exchange affected us both, and who knew what the future had in store for us? Who knew what the future had in store now? Still, I was confident that we would get through it and stay together no matter what came our way. Demon, devil, whatever, it didn't matter to us. We were unstoppable together. A moment to myself was all it took to remember everything that went on during my time in the Abyssal Plains. It was a heavy part of my life and a chapter I would never forget for as long as I lived. I sat in bed, waiting for Damien to return from his visit to the Anderson Toys Company. He wanted to pitch his next book idea to his brother and hopefully get some funding for it for art and publishing, but I had high hopes for it regardless. It was boring, however, just waiting. I let out a sigh and slid off of the bed, standing and stretching. What to do? I began to let my feet guide me through the house, wanting something to take my attention. As I let my mind wander, I couldn't help but remembering the secret alcove the house had, where Damien confessed his love for me. I wondered, was it still there? I walked through my memory, trying to find the secret passage once again. With my luck, I managed to find it and walk through it, leaving the passageway open for Damien to find me later in case I stuck around the spring for long. I walked through the dark passage and eventually entering the magical space my grandfather had created for the mansion. Hiding a beautiful hot spring. The steam was just as heavy as it was when I was last in the space, making me smile and let out a relaxing sigh. A moment in the spring was well worth everything I had gone through. I stripped down and slowly eased myself into the spring, feeling the water slowly drain my aches and stress away from the lower I slid myself. As I finally sat down, another sigh couldn't stop itself from escaping me, taking in the fresh air and slight hint of flowers emanating in the air. My thoughts simply melted away, letting me simply sit back against the edge of the spring and indulge me in the warmth around my body. Whatever. The only thing that would have made the experience perfect was Damien beside me to cuddle against. As if fate answered my selfish prayer, my thoughts were broken by the sound of slowly approaching footsteps, making me look over with a smile as I spotted familiar purple and blue eyes.
Hey, enjoying the spring?
Damien slowly began to walk towards me, stripping out of his clothes to join me as I smiled and nodded, lying back against the edge of the spring lazily. The water is so good. You're missing out. That is an adorable picture. Damien chuckled before finally joining me, sitting beside me and wrapping his arms around me. I giggled in return, nuzzling into his shoulder and chest. The water may have been warm, but feeling Damien against me made me feel just right. Damien nuzzled my head with his and kissed over my shoulder gently. How was the meeting with James?
It went good. I got the funding.
I pulled away, suddenly excited for Damien. He grinned at me, nodding and affirming his words with a happy expression. That's awesome! Congratulations! Damien laughed and gently kissed me before pulling me into a hug, wrapping his arms fully around me and holding me close. I cuddled into his embrace, waves of joy practically emanating from us. This was the start of Damien's future, and I would be standing beside him, eager to see him grow and become the successful person he wanted to be. Damien softly kissed my cheek and let out a sigh, relaxing his embrace but not letting me go.
You are such an inspiration to me.
Damien.
It's true. You've supported me and been with me ever since we met. You did everything to protect me and give me everything I could have ever wanted.
Damien slightly pulled away and stared into my eyes, his own full of love and passion that glimmered in the light of the magically made moon above us.
How did I ever come to deserve you?
I smiled sweetly and cupped Damien's cheek, feeling him nuzzle into my palm as I kissed his cheek softly. I knew very well that our relationship came from us deserving each other. I loved him and he loved me. It was all that mattered in the end. I should be asking the same thing, but I know that we perfectly deserve each other. I felt like I was in some sort of blissful dream, staring into Damien's eyes as he became lost in mine. I love you, Damien.
I love you too.
I couldn't stop my smile from growing before leaning in and kissing Damien lovingly, feeling him kiss back with the same amount of love and passion I had. Our lives would lead us to a blissful future, one of full adventure, joy, and endless waves of affection for one another. He obtained his dream and I had obtained mine. And that was my perfect happily ever after. And you are my dearest dream. Ah, we're done. We'll save the credits for Sam, since he's the canon ending. Oh my god, we did it. We got the true ending for Damien. Nice. Okay, so before I end it, I decided the next person that we are going to pursue is... You see the heart right there? It's Matthew. We are going to do Matthew's route next. Since that was, according to the poll, since that got the second most votes, I'll do Matthew. And then I think one other person voted to do Diana's route, so I'll do Matthew's route, and then I'll do Diana's route. And then from there, I'll put up a poll for either we can pursue James or Eric after Diana. Because, well, I was going to put Sam, but, like, he's the canon route, and I'm like, why not do the canon route last? So, yeah. So, in the next video, I'll be doing Matthew's route. So... But for now, thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, then click the thumbs up. If you'd like to see more of my videos, then click subscribe. Anyways, I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye!